welcome to another episode of the Digital Access Show. Yes, I keep using another episode. That's predictability, which is one of the guidelines of the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. Here at the Digital Access Show, we talk about communication, we talk about usability, we talk about accessibility, because after all, to be a usable document, whether it's a website or a document, it needs to be accessible. Not every accessible document is usable. Trust me, there's that line. And our guest today knows that line really well. And I met Tracey Hayim from Metamorphosis Design through another lovely lady, Jackie McRae. Tracey has actually attended few training sessions that I did on the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And more to the point, Tracey is a graphic designer with a difference. Tracey, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. Thanks, Narelle. Thanks for having me on your podcast. It's really an honor to be with you, and actually also an honor to have learned the rules around accessibility and web design. I think which is very valuable for any graphic designer who is designing a user experience for their viewers. We don't know who they are, so therefore we need to make sure that the design will cater for everybody. So
Yeah.
thank you for having me. And also just to say, actually, Jackie McRae invited me
Yeah.
and introduced me, and she's from CopyCred.
Mm.
And I value actually Jackie's working with Jackie, because Jackie takes the words and the communication and simplifies it for
Mm.
accessibility, which is essential. And then what I would do is do the visual side of the experience. That's
Yeah.
my focus.
Yeah. And that's what I wanted you to tell people, Tracey. Tell them a bit about yourself and why you got into the web content accessibility and what was it about it that you said, I need to learn this?
Okay, so I think Narelle, for me, ever since I studied graphic design from the very, very early days, and I start with actually my first competition I ever won was for the School of Autism in South Africa. They were
Oh,
looking for a poster to communicate what autism was. And in those days, I'm talking now maybe 35 years ago or even more, there was not much education on what autism was. But I
mm,
had gone to school where I saw children who had autism and walked around. And I then decided, well, what was my concept that I would communicate with? And I kept it really very simple. I said, they can see, they can smell, they can touch, they can do all that we can do. They're human. It's just the way and the nuances of how they process things. And
mm,
I've always actually been passionate about that, is how do you help somebody who's struggling in life to feel connected and engaged in humanity, in living their
mm,
life? How do you do that? And I think perhaps even I might be even ADHD. And so I know for me that often if I go into a room or even if I go online or I watch a presentation and I see it all being very chaotic, where things aren't aligned or there's blurry
oh,
background, something that irritates you,
yeah,
I go, it needs to be cleaned up.
yeah.
I'm almost a little bit like a garbage collector. It's tidy, and so, people go, how do you think what does my design look like? And I go, and they say, oh, I'm so sorry. I say, don't worry, dump all the content you want on your page, because but a design eye, there are rules around it, is how do you simplify it?
Yeah.
And that simplicity of removing and taking away is what the art of design is. And
Oh,
often the art of the design is simplifying so that it is easy to process, because
mm,
people have very limited absorption of information. So a regular person has like 4 milliseconds to
mm,
absorb visual information, which means you need to then simplify. And we think that we want to be creative beings and have such beautiful things. Creativity is about adding this, and oh, I like Canva and I want to add a extra effect on, and I want to put in, oh, let's try this tool. And it becomes like a big hodgepodge because you've tried all the little special effects. But
Yeah.
actually, that is what causes anxiety, and allows people to, you don't realize it's like walking into a spacious room or a gallery. People walk into a gallery and they see that beautiful piece of artwork on a white wall. And it's as simple as you see the artwork on the white wall. And that's called curation. But actually, every space that somebody goes into, whether it's a website, you want them to feel that as well. You want them to feel that when they go in, it's simplified. And I'm passionate about that as a designer because it allows people to see the message clearly. So you have to know what is the message you want to be saying and remove everything else, like a stop sign.
So when you did the web content
Yes.
accessibility guideline training with me, because that's one of the things that really I remembered about you when we did the training is you were all about simplification. And really that's what we're talking about with the web WCAG as the nickname is,
Yes.
simplifying things because the more complex, the more stuff you throw at it, it does become overwhelming. I like that idea. And I like the words you used, anxiety creation. And I think, we've talked about that before. So WCAG, in your mind, simplifies and refines.
Absolutely. It gives you kind of also boundaries and rules around what. So whatever you've studied, the web rules are
Mm.
boundaries.
Yeah.
And actually, if you think about it, everybody in this world thrives around boundaries, but
Mm.
it's understanding the person and the viewer and the audience who's going to be reading it. Who
Mm.
is the person going to that website,
Yeah.
right? So, and I think we've even discussed it, Narelle, is that we make assumptions that
Mm.
everybody processes the same way and
Yeah.
perceives things the same way. But actually, I think the systems that we've been grown up to believe that you should even develop at 4 years old, you should be doing this, or even
Mm.
6 months, you should be crawling. Actually, if we had to look at the bigger, I'm really talking universal, if you
Yeah.
took out this time, actually, people are learning at very different times, even on a spiritual timeline. And so, if we took away these rigid rules around it and got to understand a person and an individual more than we do, we will understand how people process and what they need. And I think then it comes back to design because design of a website or design of a house, for example,
Yeah.
all needs to be about the understanding and the intention of what it's going to be used for.
So is that looking at, so the first principle of WCAG is perception, perceivability.
Yes.
And is that really what you're talking about, where the other three, which is operability, understanding, well, understanding it come into graphic design, and but robust, operability and robust are really about the implementation, where perceivability is really about the perception and the design of the website, along with like there's four guidelines in it, which is text alternative, time-based, adaptable and distinguishable. Is all of that part of the graphic design area?
Yes, I think you've got to understand and see how people perceive, understand a person or your audience. It comes
Mm.
back to that. And I think in our world right now, I honestly think that there is just so much content,
Mm.
so much happening, so many new little tools that we can use, and it creates an excitement, and yet it creates an overwhelm. So what you have to always do is perceive who is your audience
Mhm.
and step back and remove things so that it's clear. I think that when you are designing when you're feeling anxious, for example, as a designer,
Yeah.
you don't feel like it's enough, you start to add
Yeah.
things, right? You want to start to look at your page or whatever you're designing and start to remove. Am I getting my message across?
Mm-hmm.
Will somebody see my message? And I think that is the tool or the skill a graphic designer should work on. It's
Mm-hmm.
almost that when you start working as a graphic designer on digital or print, you might put everything down and then you've got to step back from the canvas and go, can you see the real message? What
Mm-hmm.
is the real message? Have you cluttered it? I do this on a regular basis when I design. I might put everything down and then I go back and I step back from the canvas and I say, am I getting my message across?
Mm.
And often it will be that you need to remove a lot of things and change contrast, for example.
Yep.
You might have the most important sentence. For example, on your screen, you've got, I'm just going to remove my timer. You've got accessibility and the digital access. I'm just trying to, so I can read it. The digital access show, right?
Yep.
Now, if that was put into a dark background
Mm.
turquoise with the same font on that turquoise instead of on white, it would not be accessible for anyone.
Oh, okay. Yep. Yep. I
There
get
is
what you're
that,
saying.
you're not seeing the most important thing is you and the name of your podcast or your show. Do you agree? Like that is what's
Yeah. Yeah.
important. So
Yeah. It is.
what I often say to people is they will present what they've been designing, and I go, you're showing me so much, but actually this is all about you. Remove all the other stuff. Let me see your particular, even if it's your logo.
Mm.
So it's taking away a lot of things and keeping the most important information on the page. That
Tra-
is great design.
Tracy, when you're setting up, like when you're doing a project, so you're implementing the accessibility guidelines now, and I
Yes.
know from other conversations we've had, one of the things that I keep saying to people is you understand what you've written, you understand your message. Does the person that you want to reach with that message understand it? How do you bring that into graphic design? Because
Okay.
everyone's different. And if you say, I'm designing for the woman in her mid 50s who's doing, hang
Yes.
on, that woman in mid 50s might have a vision impairment, a hearing impairment. She might be in a wheelchair. Who knows? No one knows. Do you
Right.
think, when they're doing profiles and things like that, that people tend to do when they
Yes.
set up a project, they create the ideal profile target candidate. Should that be done in a project in a graphic design? What should you do?
Definitely should be. And I'm going to
Mhm.
say this to you, and it's actually a very, very important part of the
Mhm.
design process is the research.
Yeah.
You have to go back. So, Narelle, I did that with Jackie's
Hmm.
website. I designed it with the understanding and learning from the course.
Hmm.
However, I went back to you to clarify a few things.
Yeah.
I think it's actually essential to have people who are varied and different types of people looking at the site for research. Is it working?
Hmm.
Because that should be part of the design process,
Okay.
right? So, yes, I understand the design elements should be simple. That's what I've studied.
Mm.
But part of it is to actually check in with the rules and guidelines of what we learned about contrast and color,
Yes.
but also test.
Yeah.
Test, see, is it working? And get feedback, which is part
Okay.
of that design process. So everybody has to work together. Is the language working? Is the visual working? And then test it out.
Mm.
Because perception is a lot of things. It's perception could be that something's flashing and irritates and it stirs some emotional, underlying emotional trauma in a
Mhm.
person, or it could be that um, they can't read it. So I do believe that the research and part of the design process should be that you have a very strong awareness for web accessibility for all abilities.
Yeah.
Because actually, I'm short of hearing. So for me, that's a disability, right? I love working online because I can hear better actually when I'm working versus somebody at the end of the room. So yes, that's something I go, you do need to design
Mm.
with all kinds of people in mind, that they are able to see it, hear it,
Mm.
manage it. If they can't do any of those, is it's got to come as a voiceover. All those tools are absolutely essential in designing as a graphic designer. The more empathy you have and the more understanding of how different we all are, the more successful you'll be as a designer working on web design that is used by everybody. It's got to be accessible.
This is, every time I do this show, something comes up and I learn something. And I've never really thought about graphic design, and it's silly that I haven't. Graphic
Yes,
design and the perceivability principle of accessibility guidelines, and they are married. They are such a tight-knit
definitely.
thing. And you would, if you're not keeping the two married, then you're not going to have a design that's usable, is it?
Absolutely. I believe that those basic principles
Mm.
that are part of web accessibility are almost aligned with the basic design principles.
Yeah.
And they are not something everybody in today's world know. And they're designing websites because it's quick and easy.
Yep.
And they are not considerate of it unless they're using a platform like Squarespace, which has got really simple templates.
Mm.
But do they know this? Do they actually understand very simple design principles? Um,
Yeah.
and I don't know if a lot of people do. That's my passion, is that I go, you don't understand design. And you can see, like, even if you look at your page, or even if you
Mm.
understand the Zoom logo, it's very simple.
Yeah.
Great design is very simple. Great um, user experience is very simple. It's not cluttered. Take away is my
Mm. Wow.
remove.
Tracy, what are a couple of points? I mean, is that your advice to give to people? Take away, keep it simple.
Definitely. It's take away all that at the absolute minimum is there um, with and still communicate your message.
Yeah.
That is the role of a designer, is keep it simple and make sure it's delivering the message. And that would be the same for a content writer.
Mm.
Jackie would do the same. In
Yeah.
our world today, you want it to be easy
Yeah.
for
Oh my
everybody,
gosh.
for
Tracy,
everybody.
thank you. I've learnt so much in what, 15, 20 minutes. How do people get in contact with you, Tracy, to keep the conversation going? Because the points you've made are just, I'm going to go back and look at the guidelines again because
Yes.
obviously I work in them all day, every day, but it's just adding a different set of eyes. It's changing my perceptions about the guidelines. It's how do people keep the conversation going with you, Tracy? How can they
Oh, well,
contact
you
you?
know what? I am on, supposed to contact me would be easy now is I would say metamorphosisdesignconsultants.com.au.
Yep.
You can book a chat with me. You can have a look at what products and services I have. And I do have a brand starter kit, which actually to me is essential for any business because when I design it with accessibility in mind.
Yeah.
Is a logo brand should be very simple and very reproducible on print or digital. And part of that would be designing it that it is easy to read and communicate your message. That is what my role is from a visual perspective. So that I would go to my website.
Yeah, thanks, Tracey. Thank you
Right.
so much for your time. So that's today's episode of the Digital Access Show. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, or the DASAP website actually has a list of all the shows that we've done so far. Coming up soon, we're actually going to be creating a YouTube channel just for the Digital Access Show, just to make it a bit more easy to find. And we'll see you next time. Have a great week. Bye bye.